And here we go.
Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
And what is going on, everyone? It is Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you are tuned in to another edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative's editor-in-chief. To my left, you're right at home. He does his own intro. It's in his contract.
Coming at you live and direct straight from the ODPH studios. My name is Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. Ken, Matt, always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And joining us as he does each every week, one half of the dynamic duo of Drafts and Dialogue, bringing you that pop culture knowledge you need to know. It's Matt from Hops Geeks News.
What up? It is great to be here. Always a good time talking Batman. Even more so when the long-awaited absolute Batman is the topic of tonight, along with some other really exciting special guests. What's up, guys?
Yes, that is true. We do have a very special guest joining us momentarily. He's finishing up something. He'll be swinging right into the chat. So that being said, super chat, definitely make your voices heard. You are tuned into the home of pop culture positivity, nerdinitiative.com, and you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed to Nerd Initiative on YouTube for exclusive content, because we do have more content creators doing interviews this week and a very special one dropping Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to know who that is, you got to make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap that bell notification, and make sure you get reminded, and hit that thumbs up to let the boss know that you like what you're hearing at Nerd Initiative. Like we said, Scott is coming in momentarily, but in the meantime, we just have to recap an event that went down last week at the comic shops, because a book dropped that is defined as a game changer, defined as epic, monumental, and that is DC All-In Special #1. So this book really kicked off a new era of DC Comics, and coming out of the pages of Absolute Power, the Justice League has been reformed, but this is a different version than we've seen, and then the events that played out have now become the catalyst for what is going to be an event and a universe, to be honest, to take over the rest of 2024 and beyond. So we'll do this like we always do on Turn a Page. If you're new to joining us, we like to give a spoiler-free statement of what we're talking about. Then we give a breakdown of the book that is at hand, and then we give our grades, and then obviously we are going to be talking with Scott Snyder about Absolute Batman when he swings through. So that being said, I'll start with Tom. What is your spoiler-free take on DC All-In Special #1?
What the? Oh my God! It really okay. Put it to you this way: DC has done how many whiteboard magic erasers? They have just taken that and went to heck with all this. We got something else. Deal with it. And trust me, I want to. And then some.
Oh, absolutely, Matt. How about you?
No, I mean, exactly like Tom said, they kind of just said, hey, we got this direction. And that's one of the good things about DC, right? However, they kind of did something that didn't really catch me off guard, but it kind of did, is they acknowledged previous events while moving forward with this kind of new tale. And also, they just brought so many characters into the fold. Everybody's getting their Justice League card. You're full, you're bubbly, you're excited. And then things go south because you knew they definitely were. And it was just a roller coaster of holy crap for 52 pages.
Mm-hmm. And when we say events, this one lived up to the hype, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We came out of the dawn of DC's era, which, I mean, personally, I thought was fantastic, and into Absolute Power, which is one of the biggest events of the year. And the conclusion is the reformation of the Justice League, which they disbanded during this time, dawn of DC. The Titans were the big main superhero group of DC. And unfortunately, they could not withstand the threat of Amanda Waller and the Trinity of Evil. So the aftermath here, after defeating Waller, they're now starting a brand new Justice League. and seeing Darkseid come in, and this is a Darkseid we haven't seen before at this level.
Spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, this is something that really threw everybody off when I saw it, and to see the ramifications spawn out of this, everything really came into focus. And you do have this wide open playbook now that is going to be something that fans are going to gravitate towards. I fully believe it. And it's really opened up the doors for a lot of creativity, not just for the Absolute Universe, but for the all-in movement as well, because it's a great jumping on point for every DC title. And you don't often get that a lot in comics. So you can go into your shops, and if you see that all-in logo, you go pick that up, you're boom, right into a new story, and you're falling in love with the characters that you've grown up with for 80 plus years now. I mean, we just came across Batman Day, which is 85 years of Batman. And it's wild to think that that is the case. But yet again, here we are, and a new dawn is born here at DC Comics.
Ken's absolutely right. How it says it does give you a new focus. But one thing I want everybody to try and realize what they're doing here with this all in and how it's leading in is the fact that a lot of times when we see comic book companies do a reboot or a refocus, it's seen through one lens. The lens that we're getting through this is panoramic. Like, it is across the whole board. So this is a completely new universe. We know where we're going, but we know where we're coming from, but we really don't know where we're going, because it is that it's such a wide sweep. And I think it's going to be something for everybody in this whole new storytelling aspect.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. I wholly agree, Tom, with what you're saying, right? They're giving the panoramic view. And I think something that they're really doing with this book is they didn't focus on the Justice League as we kind of know them. Like, sure, Superman's there, Batman's there, Wonder Woman's there, but they didn't like, hey, the focus is Superman and Batman and the Trinity saving the day. No, like, they focused on some other characters, like Swamp Thing was there, Zatanna was there. Spectre was being shot out for better or for worse, right? If you know what happens. And then Booster Gold is kind of like the focus of this issue, which, I mean, really, Justice League, they've never let off with, like, they're not B characters by any means, but Booster Gold has never quite been the focus of a Justice League story so much. And so having these characters that don't get their time to shine necessarily, have their time to shine kind of while the Trinity and the Seven are in the background, like, I think that's a fantastic idea, because it shows they're not afraid to tell something new.
I also think the Booster comes off really easily as the everyman that we can see through Booster's eyes more than anything, because how easy is it? How hard, can you relate to Wonder Woman? Can you relate to Martian Manhunter? No, but can you relate to a guy who's down on his luck, who's middle-class dude, who's working in a, museum, who wants to be a hero, saving today for a better future tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great prompt.
I might have just watched that episode of Justice League where they thought he was Green Lantern. So I'm just saying, like, that's how I know Booster Gold.
but that's how it connects, because you have such a wide variety of heroes at DC. And that's one thing that with the dawn of DC, you get that exposure. And now to carry it through for the all-in movement, and we're going to have new series out with great creative teams behind it. And they're really opening up the playbook. And that's something for a fan you can gravitate towards. And it all starts here.
Yeah.
And then what spawns out of this? I mean, I think we have to go into spoiler talk right now for DC All In special number 1. So everybody has been fair warned. So in 3, 2, 1, Tom, what is your reaction to what went down last week?
I'm sorry, Ken. I was blowing up your phone and I was reading it because I was having no shit.
Yeah,
I was.
I was going to say, super chat, definitely throw in your opinions on DC All In special too, by the way.
Yeah, shout out. First of all, we got somebody watching from Peru. That's really awesome. I just want to say that real quick. Like, that's awesome.
Matt, how about you?
No, I'm with Tom. This book is filled with so many holy crap moments. Like, obviously, when you find out that Darkseid has bonded with Spectre, who Spectre is literally like one of the most OP characters in DC Comics, you're just like, okay, well, it's game over, right? Like, okay, we're getting this new all-in series, but it's over as soon as it started, because how are you going to beat this? And he looked dope, like with the black and the red, and then you see like this brutal side of him just crushing his minions and creating his own almost green Dark Lantern Corps, and you're just like, wow, this is how you're kicking off this issue? What? It's amazing.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, to think about where we open with too, and seeing how Superman is going about recruiting, because we did know from Absolute Power that, yeah, this movement was going to happen. And the fact they did a time jump 1 year in advance, and to really show about the lengths they've gone to, because with Amanda Waller nearly taking over the world and then some in absolute power, the Justice League had a point that was brought up by Oliver Queen about how the league is needed. And this goes right into the movement that we see with Superman flying around and handing out cards to everybody. And I love what DC is doing at the comic shops too, because if you're buying some DC comics, I forget how many you need to buy, but you're getting
All of them.
Yeah, you're getting Justice League Internet or Unlimited cards. And it's such a cool thing to see play out too. And I know our producer behind the scenes here is going to be showing the pic, and you can see this, and it goes like with Superman flying in the scene here, it really jumps into effect. And you see just the wide range of heroes involved too, which I'm sorry, anytime you throw Robot Man in there, it goes.
Yeah.
Well, what about Red? Red Arrow, Arsenal? Come on. He doesn't get his due.
I mean, take a look at everybody's on screen.
Yeah, we get like some Doom Patrol action, Nightwing, we even get some callbacks to like, Dark, the Nightmare DC run that happened over the summer, which I loved. Like there's a lot of good, like, look at all these callbacks, look at all these characters, look at all this different cool artwork that shows up on here. It's colorful.
I absolutely love is that we have a very classic looking Superman.
Yes.
Like we don't have New 52, slick suave. We know like this is a very buffed out Chris Reeves Superman. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a classic Superman. They're pulling out all the stops because they want to go somewhere with this, but they're also paying homage to everything that's come before it.
Yeah. And plus too, they do a quick recap of the year that was in DC. We have Night Terrors mentioned, Beast World, Absolute Power. So this is a great way to catch up about the past, but also jump into the future here because the wide range of characters we see involved. And then when we go to the next picture too, we get to see one character stand out. And when we saw Booster Gold get involved,
I was so happy.
Yeah. This became monumental.
He's got that Superman-esque bringing the children down in his arms. Like, what? Like, Booster Gold is getting this moment? What?
He saved the cat, too.
He did.
Yeah. But it plays out, too, because you see Superman is personally recruiting him. And the fact that Superman is making this very personable and going up to every recruit and welcoming them into the new Justice League, that is a big deal right there. I mean, is it not, Tom?
I think it is another big deal that as much as I do love, like I said, Booster's the everyman here. The creation of the cards themselves, which we saw on an earlier panel, we didn't see on here, but in the book on an earlier panel, you see that each individual, I guess you could say team, like the Magic team, the Tech team, the Power Cosmic team, they each imbued the card with a little bit of essence, quintessence of themselves into it. So literally that card has everything they need in the Justice League right there. There was one panel and one thing that they did say that kind of irked me, but we'll talk about that later because I'm like, that I don't like that. But I could see it coming back to bite them in the ass in the new books.
Well, I mean, it might go down. I mean, Matt, what about you? What was your feelings here?
I agree with Tom. Like one of the cool things was the cards, and I love that they integrated it into, when you go to your comic book shop, giving you an incentive to go to your LCS, right? Scott, who's going to be joining us here soon as he wraps some things up, was like, hey, if you go and pick up, All In, you're going to get one of the cards from your comic book shop, which I thought was really cool. And they personalized them. I think having as many members as you do to personalize it, it adds an element of like, wow, it really has that team. It really has that excitement. I mean, it almost feels like you yourself are joining the Justice League and getting your invite because it's so personal and exciting. And then to see Superman, who is, by all means, like the mega star, taking time to actually be heartfelt when Booster Gold himself was like, I'm the joke. I get I'm a jokester. Like, why am I here? And it was just a really heartfelt, sentimental moment that I thought really stuck its landing and did what it intended to do.
He's on crowd control.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you think about how they're implementing this, and we see Mr. Terrific involved in at the Watchtower, the brand new Watchtower too, and explaining about how they went about the recruiting. And they said, we need a real Justice League, and they make Justice League Unlimited to play out. Like see how they really went all in about this, no pun intended. They really wanted to make sure this included everybody in the DCU. And this really made it feel special. This really made it feel important. And to see the pitch going on and having a character like Booster Gold who comes in late and it is really feels like the fish out of water, so to speak. Like, what am I doing here? And then right when he shows up, we have the ultimate party crasher show up in Darkseid. And this is a Darkseid that we have never seen before, albeit with a different kind of hand. And you can see right here from the flip book portion of it too, how we went about this, because in the flip side of All In, he is on a quest, a very dangerous quest for power. And it leads him to acquiring who, Tom?
The wrath of God. The specter. I mean, as I was reading this, I literally had to get up after, blowing your phone up. I had to get up and like go and word vomit this to my wife. And as much as, she likes comics, but at the same time, she knew when I said this happened, she even had that, oh crap moment.
Yeah. I mean, Matt, when you're seeing this, what's your reaction?
I mean, yeah, right? You're just like, oh, it's Darkseid. Okay, up to Darkseid shenanigans. And then it's like, but wait, there's more. And you're just like, oh my God, how do they made it fresh. They made it unexpected. And I'm just like, Tom, like, I'm sitting there reading this, just like talking to my dogs as though they care about what's happening.
No, you need to blow up Ken's phone next time.
I will blow up Ken's phone next time. But like, I did after reading Absolute Batman, I can tell you that much. But yeah, with this, I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, to see all this unfold too, especially Darkseid acquiring that and running through literally heaven and hell to confronting a DC evil.
Dude, he went to hell. Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, he was on the mission to go get the power because he knew that that's what was needed. And then when you see him show up at the JLI tower, this is where like you see the throwdown go, and it's like it's a battle that we've seen before, but it was one that it felt fresh and new and exciting. And it was just like, wait a sec, how the heck is the DC heroes going to stand up to him at this level?
Yeah. And
then watching what unfolds, because we find out, I mean, he was doing this all as a ploy, was he not, Matt?
He was. And when those Omega beams hit, and with Zatanna and stuff, and Batman's like, Omega beams, it felt like when The Rock's music hit after Bad Blood, and we get the final boss showing up. That's exactly what it felt like.
I have to agree with you. I mean, as the wrestling fans, yeah. I mean, it felt like that moment.
He even had his own championship belt with the ring. Okay, he wasn't carrying a belt, but he had the ring, which might as well have been a championship belt.
Yeah, and then the result from this onslaught. I mean, he's taken out, and he's like, to paraphrase, he's thanking Superman because he has now been granted the one thing he was trying to do. He winds up creating his own universe.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how DC deals with multiverses, I mean, it's always a tricky line, in my opinion. Super chat, let me know your thoughts on multiverses. But in the DC universe, I mean, it's always like it can go either hit or miss. But the fact that Darkseid now has created his own universe, it scares the absolute you-know-what out of the Justice League, and rightfully so. And the only way that they can go in there is somebody that has
Tachyon.
Yes. And there's only one hero here that does.
Skeets.
The volunteers. Yeah.
Oh, wait. And Booster.
So we see the most unlikely hero step up to the plate thinking this is just going to be something simple. It's going to be something, okay, I can get by with this. And as he goes through, they tell him, as long as you don't lose Skeet, you're okay. Well, he loses Skeet. And he winds up waking up in the absolute universe to one of the more frightening images I think we could think of. And that is a Darkseid visioned legion of superheroes.
And not just, taking the Justice League, but hey, let's pull literally the Legionnaires. So I'm looking at, there's Wolfsbane, there's Lightning Lad, there's Cosmic Boy. And I'm like, we're about 1,000 years away from these characters, but Darkseid said, I don't care. I got this.
Well, that's the one thing that I'm sure we're going to explore as we go on, is what is the lengths of his power now? Because we don't know.
Time is relative. Let's be honest. It's a comic book. So if he wants to, he can do that. It's just how it's written is what I'm more concerned about.
Yeah. I mean, Matt, how about you?
No, yeah, I mean, I'm not really worried about how it's written. I think that there's a plan, and it's so far like that was very stellar. My only thing is like, all right, where do we go from here? Like, how do you top this big of an entrance. Which I mean, come on, I have no doubt that it's going to happen. But now I just need it like right now. I need it right now. That's my big thing. Is like I need this now.
Yeah, I mean, I was right there with you. I sat here and I was going like they went for a home run out the gate, and they hit it, in my opinion. I think if you want to make a statement, you accomplish the goal, because this felt, at least in my opinion, like something that we haven't seen before. That we really saw a creative take, that letting Darkseid run crazy, more or less. And he's in his own little universe that he can literally do whatever he wants, to our knowledge. And to see how the heroes that we know are going to be visioned over there, that leaves a whole different ball of wax that we're just going to have to sit back and enjoy as fans. But it allows the creators that are going to be involved with this a lot of room and a lot of creativity. So when we can see this play out, it really says like, hey, we're going to show you something different. This isn't just going to be a reboot. This isn't going to be anything like, I know the early word about this was comparisons to the Ultimate Universe. I don't feel it's that.
Nope.
By any stretch of the imagination. I think this is going to be something that's different, that fans are going to really enjoy, because the creative teams involved are, I mean, we're talking to the best of the best, and they're going to be really bringing out the uniqueness of this universe along with the character traits that we know.
I think going off what you're saying about it, this is akin to the Ultimate Universe. The thing is, the Ultimate Universe was familiar but different. I think this is the flip side. It is different but familiar.
No,
what I'm saying?
No, it completely makes sense. I mean, Matt, how about you?
No, yeah, I get where you're going with. I think there's definitely a big air of familiarity to it, with that difference. So I see what Tom's trying to say, and I definitely get that. I don't think we've ever seen Darkseid to this degree, to be honest with you. I really don't, which gives it that air of excitement to the difference, right? And then, like I talked about, the difference in this story is the fact that we're going backseat characters almost, which is very exciting, because I think it's very deserved to see how some people get their time to shine, such as Booster Gold, who I love and love, and I really hope we get to see in live action one day. But I definitely follow what Tom's saying, and I do agree for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talked about a lot of great things about this book. Was there anything you did not like about this book, Tom?
Yes, there was one statement about the book, about the cards, that really irked me. That, as Mr. Terrific was going on and on about it, it said something that it would augment their powers, and that one threw me off.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
is that augmentation exactly the twisted part that we're going to get in this absolute universe? Because Darkseid twisted it.
It's a great question.
Like that's where I
Didn't
went.
even think about that. Yeah.
So that's why I'm around. I think
That's true. That's why we keep you here. All right.
Can we-
You're good for something, okay?
Sometimes. And another thing, I was just looking up, like, if they adapt this, can we please get Michael Ironside back to voice Darkseid?
I mean, if I would not be objecting to that.
I wouldn't either.
Keith David might be also a good one, but just let's bring back Michael Ironside from Superman animated series. I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it too. I mean, if we go that route, Matt, I mean, what about you? Was there anything you didn't like about this?
No, not really. To be honest with you, I didn't. It opened up with like this, exciting time, full of excitement. Quickly went south, as you knew it would, to a side of Darkseid, haha, that we haven't seen necessarily. And I think that's why I really love Darkseid. That's why I like DC, is because they're not afraid to push the limits and push the envelope. So there really wasn't any. I'm trying to find something, and at that point, that's how I know I liked everything.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I mean, there really wasn't anything that stood out that was really super out of thought. I thought they did a great job about establishing, okay, a year has passed, what has gone on? And to really think about, the league has taken a year to be rebuilt. That goes to show the impact of what happened in Absolute Power.
Yeah.
That you have to rebuild that trust with teammates, and something that was broken there. And the direction that they want to go with, that the world needs a Justice League, whether they want it or not, and the steps they're going about to take it. And to see how many heroes are involved in this movement, and seeing it through Booster Gold's eyes. I mean, I thought that was a really creative take on it. And I thought it really helped drive that point home. I mean, even though we did have a lot of like Booster, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know why I'm here kind of vibes. I think that maybe that would be something I thought was just getting a little
That was a little out of character, I feel like. You're right. He was doubting himself, which isn't something you really see from Booster because he's always got that confidence and swag to him. But I also understand it because he's being approached for once and he's kind of like, wait, what? And so maybe we've even seen like the best of the best kind of have that imposter syndrome. So I think that was crossing his mind for a second, but that quickly went away.
With rebuilding the Justice League, who didn't make the team? That's what I want to know. If they took a whole year to assemble all these pieces, like Justice League Lego, who didn't make it back on the team? I want to know.
Well, we saw Robot Man turned him down.
Well, no.
He did not make it. He turned him down.
Right.
So it's not like he didn't get asked.
I mean, can I see the Rolodex from the last team to this team and see who was pulled out?
Well, I mean, that could be something for another backstory that we don't know yet. And I could fully see a creator running with it, a creative team running with that and saying like, I wasn't good enough to make the Justice League. Like, what's wrong with my powers? And kind of a little fun story there. Those turn into like those reluctant stories.
Plastic.
Let me get some one shots of just like dejected, rejected Justice League members, having a crisis, if you will, and saving their little city or something like that. Like, that'd be fun.
Like Hawk, but no Dove.
Yeah, I mean, it's one bad day featuring whatever superhero there.
The Creeper.
I mean, well, that's the one great thing about DC, especially with this all-in movement, that they could do that and really showcase that. And, like I say, when you're doing unlimited, I mean, it's literally pretty much every hero you could think of for whatever reason to plug and play. And to see that they're bringing it back in such a bold manner. I mean, that is something for a fan to get excited about too, because it's been so long since we've seen them. And it's nothing to take away from what was going on in Dawn of DC. I think that was one of the stronger runs of DC, in my opinion, because you were really pushing side characters, so to speak, like the ones that are not the A-list. And they were really getting time to shine. Some of the stories that we had there really jumped out as fans. And I kind of felt like that was the same way in this movement too. And when you start thinking about what they're doing now, because with Darkseid and what's going to be the mission there, because I'm sure they're not going to say, well, Booster's lost. He'll find his way home. I think that we're going to have some stories going on with the all-in movement that they'll come back to this at some point. But for right now, that's going to be the question about where do we go from here? And I think that for doing a launching point, it was one that really stood out and really made some noise. So that being said, we'll give our grades on this. So we'll start with you, Tom, out of 10. Chat, super chat. If you've read this, give us your grades. Where does this rank in on your scale from 1 to 10? Tom?
10. Easy. It's simple. 10. Like if you're not enjoying this because of how many times the DC has just, cleared the board to start something new, but to do it in this manner, it's a freaking 10. That's it.
Fair enough. Matt, how about you?
It's Simone Biles on the floor, man. It's a 10 out of 10. Come on. What more do you need? Like, you got action, adventure, dire straits. You got villains being strong. You have villains creating their own league, man. You got it all in this comic, and there is so much to be excited about.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, this was an easy 10, and knowing the creative teams behind this, and especially to do a flip book. I know we didn't spend a lot of time breaking that down, but you really saw the two perspectives come. And I know that is going to be something that is going to be emphasized. And I know we're going to be asking Scott about that when he comes in momentarily. It is going to be a situation that they have a lot of groundwork they built. They packed this issue out, and to see Darkseid's drive and the ruthlessness that he's had. But this was almost done with like a cold demeanor, even like for him, like the amount he was willing to go to for this, and to really say like, I'm willing to sacrifice, my family, which, I mean, that's really nothing in his case, but to sacrifice his hand, to sacrifice literally everything that he's been striving for to go and get this power, and then literally take the gamble that it's going to pay off. And now we have a brand new universe out of it. And on the flip side, about where Superman's connected to, and seeing that this is the heroes universe and reforming the Justice League and the impact it does, because let's face it, he's always referred to as the de facto leader of the group. And now he bears that responsibility, and to see where it goes, it's really going to kick in some great things going on, especially with what is going on next week. And we threw up the bat
Or you mean
signal.
tomorrow?
Yes, because I say we've been talking about a week for a while, but he's here. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming to the show, the first kickoff book out of the Absolute Universe is dropping tomorrow at the shops. And after 4 years, one of the best writers in comics today is returning to the city he made famous of Bright Lights and Dark Nights with a whole new initiative going on with a Cape Crusader that we have never seen before. From Dudley Datson and the Forever Machine, Canary, Barnstormers, Noctera, and one of this year's best books, By a Thread, which is coming out in print very, very shortly, I believe, by year's end from Dark Horse Comics. Please welcome to the show the one and only SCOTT SNYDER. Scott, what is going on?
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me.
Oh, man, thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Oh.
No, I've been looking forward to it. I'm sorry, I was like just putting my 5-year-old to bed, and I was like, is he gonna get to sleep? Is he gonna get to sleep? And then at the perfect minute, he was like out. So I'm really glad I made it. It's I appreciate you having me.
Oh, man, anytime. I mean, we're all excited about what is going on. We've just been raving about All In, and especially you and Joshua Williamson and the team dropped last week. So let's kick this off with talking about it. Like 4 years gone, now you're back. How did this all come to be with you and the All In movement?
Oh man, it's such a. By the way, I'm sorry. I'm in my son's room because my office out there is like I forgot to heat it, and it's cold in
Yeah.
October here, and
It is starting to get cold.
so I don't usually have like a gold chain gaming.
Are you sure? I don't know. It's chaos right now, Scott. You can be honest. Like I know we all get into our fandoms.
If
As
only,
a fellow
right?
Yankees fan, I love seeing that chain. So by all means, make sure that's
check
on
this out.
screen.
It was like a life-size Aaron
Oh.
Judge. So
Dang, that
and
rings awesome.
this was the Judge ball he got for his birthday a couple of years ago. That was like his before the 62. So we're dyed-in-the-wool baseball fans here. He was the one that like took us down that rabbit hole. His like everything about him is like is baseball oriented. So yeah, this is his amazing room. Much cooler
Oh.
than my office. So
Definitely. I give him all the props there. I love what I was seeing there.
No, I mean I'm a huge Yankee fan. Someone was like, "I know you're." I am like, but I mean like he dwarfs me. He's like, he started getting it. He's like one of those kids that like gets into a subject and then just like he's kind of like I was at that age. Like my 17-year-old is really funny. He's like popular and handsome and like totally well adjusted and like I don't relate to that at all at that age of being a teenager. And my 13-year-old is more like me, where he was like kind of obsessive about things and a little bit nervous or shy. And he like likes one subject and then kind of completely exhausts it over the course of a couple of years. So he did that with like Star Wars and Pokemon, but baseball has like stuck and it's been there because it changes every year, you know. And so he's been into it for about 4 or 5 years now. And like he's the kid, he collects baseball cards and he goes to he likes to go to Cooperstown. And so yeah, it's fun. So yes, we were just watching the Mets and the Phillies. So
That's
go
a good
Mets.
series right
It's
now.
awesome.
Go Phils.
I know, it's killer, right?
Yeah.
But yes, I'm sorry, comics. We're here to talk
No,
comics.
no, by all means, I don't mind the Yankee talk, but yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I do as a Boston, native, but it's okay. I'll allow it this year. It's Scott Snyder.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Well, yeah. So you were asking how All In came to be? Was that the question?
Yeah,
I'm
like I
sorry.
say, it's been 4 years. You're coming back, especially with such a bold initiative kicking off with All In and seeing where it's coming out now with Absolute Batman next week. How did this all come about?
It's funny, like it came about sort of slowly. Like what happened was, when I left in 2020, I just made a deal with myself that like I would do 10 years, and then I really needed to do creator owns because it felt like every single year, I like every time I went up for a new exclusive at DC, I really fought hard to get a carve out to do an indie book on the side outside of DC, outside of Vertigo, and they always gave it to me, and then I never used it because I was so like involved in everything DC. And so I was just like, when I'm done, when I do death metal, that'll be the conclusion. I got to take some time for myself. And so when I left and I was doing creator own, it was the first time I really got to read superhero comics for fun without being in that mix. And I was really struck by how many good ones there were, from Venom and Immortal Hulk and just World's Finest, just tons, Nightwing. And meanwhile, there was like this cultural conversation going on where it felt like everybody was kind of shitting on superheroes and being like, superheroes are over and there's some malaise. Even like the Times and Wall Street Journal, they were all doing these like autopsies on superheroes because the cinematic universes were kind of in a lull at that moment. And like, so I started talking to, I had always been in conversation with Marie and the people at DC, but I started talking to them more about like, you know what, because they were really nice to me and they were always like, if you want to come back and do a book, there was always that open door. And I did think about it a couple times. I was like, maybe what if I came back and did a single book? And then Marvel was also really nice about like, do you want to come over and do a superhero? And I thought about that hard too. And it really was just like, what I'd really like to be a part of is an initiative. Like I'd like to do something that makes me feel like that excitement that I felt when I was a small part of the New 52 or Rebirth. And all of those had their issues and had their high points, low points. But it was a moment when like the company, the whole like defined itself and was a part of it. And again, for all their flaws, they were this moment of like huge collective statement. And it was just fun, like, and it was of a different time also. So not to keep talking forever, but like it was of a different time, like before, when I started in comics, it was like DC was just a paper and pulp comic company on 53rd Street. And then the first year they were bought by Warner Brothers, and then that's bought by AT&T, and then Discovery Plus. And Marvel's similar with like Disney and so on. And so it just felt like it was harder and harder to do those kinds of initiatives because you have more and more and more approvals. And so I started talking to Marie and just being like, well, what if we just did one that was like the best of all the initiatives we tried, like New 52. So you do something really daring and different and new, like the Absolute Universe. But you don't do it at the expense of the main line. You do something like Rebirth with the main line, where you give them all number ones, but not literal number ones. You give them all new jumping on points. You steroid inject the line. You give everybody plenty of time to do it. And we just started talking, and it was like, yeah, let's do that. Because what it really was at core was like an initiative that's about reminding people how awesome superhero comics are, that you can have really new takes on the characters in this medium. And you can remind people of this amazing tapestry of story that's been going on for, 80, 90 years. And it's just like the greatest immersive narrative, in the world. And so it was just like, let's have a party and just remind everyone how awesome superhero comics are from like the most classic sort of Batman and Robin, Mark Waid, Chris Samney, to the most wild out there take, like what you're going to get from some of the Absolute books coming that'll be announced really soon in New York. But even the ones you have now, like Absolute Wonder Woman and Batman and that, and just go nuts and just be like, let's show you everything and create the greatest buffet. And also at the same time, really make it like retailer focused and fan focused. So it would be like no reboots, no renumbering, but instead, like if it's like you've been like for fans, if you've been enjoying something, it's still there. If it's been selling, like creative teams, a lot of them are intact. A lot of the books, none of the books are being like rebooted in some crazy way. But at the same time, like there's also new offerings, right? So there's books we haven't announced yet. There's really cool ones that are about to be announced by creators I think you're going to be excited by, all the way through December, January into February, both in the main line and in the Absolute line. And some people decided they wanted to switch it up. Like Tom Taylor really wanted to do detective, and Phil really wanted to try Batman and Robin. And Rom had this New Gods idea that was awesome. So it was like, let's do one huge big tent thing where we're all in it together. Like I'll go out and fly out and rally the troops, like in terms of get the company all feeling like we're all part of this together. Make sure it's not about me. It's not about any one person or any one book, but everybody supporting each other's books and everybody supporting, again, like the line, making incentives for retailers. And this stuff is really boring, but
No,
like
it's
a
not.
big part,
No, it's not.
I'm fascinated.
like
No, absolutely not.
a big part of it for us was like lowering the retailer variant thresholds. Like, so if a store wanted to buy in, instead of they having to buy 3,000 comics to get a retailer variant, it could be somewhere under 1,000, and trying to do it in a way where like Absolute Batman, it's like 50 or whatever pages, but keep it $4.99, and just do those things where it's like we're doing the Justice League cards, right? So every single week for 5 weeks, if you buy any 3 DC comics or 4 DC comics, it's really up to the retailer. You get like a free Justice League card that corresponds essentially with that all-in book that we did, and with the Justice League launch in November. So, you know, the real fun of it for us is like just making something that felt like it was a celebration of this medium, making something that we thought would get people into stores every single week with the cards and with the idea of new releases every week, meaning everything starting a new story for week after week after week. So if you decide, you know, if you want to go in and try Nightwing, Nightwing's starting a new story. If you want to do Batman, it's the same creative team, but they're starting a brand new story they just did last week. Everybody's starting new stories. So it's the greatest jumping on point is the way they tried to bill it in a long time. And that was exciting to me. So that's where it came from. That's what it was. And we went back and forth a lot. Like it was all the way, it was 3 New Yorks ago where we first started talking about it. And then it was at San Diego. So it was the 2 San Diegos ago where we cemented it and we're like, we're going to do it. And then it was like 2 New Yorks ago where it was like, okay, I met with them. We went to the offices officially and did all this stuff. They have an offsite office. And then at last San Diego was when Nick came and it was all cemented with, at the end of that by August, everything was moving. So it's been a long time coming. And that was part of the fun, was like making sure everybody knew internally, making sure everybody felt comfortable. It wasn't chaos, because as much as I love DC and like, I don't mind chaos, like I can deal with it. Like I sort of like, I don't know, I'm like used to it, or it doesn't, but there was a lot of chaos like those 10 years that I was there, because it just felt like it was a lot of like, for better and worse, like Dan's way of leading, and I think there was a lot of good to it, but also there was a lot of like, let's do something right now and let's change direction, and it created a lot of energy, but it could be hard to plan. And again, because of all the corporate oversight, it became harder and harder to like commit to things and plan things. And so the idea was like, let's do something where we really have a runway. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell, all in. And then it came like, let's make the story.
Yeah.
Like me and Josh. So
and
yeah.
And it's a hell of a story too, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I
Oh,
say,
thanks.
you guys really made a first impression, and it's bold, it's epic, it's game changer. It is literally what you want out of an event. And like I say, the buzz coming out of this too, going into the books coming tomorrow and then the weeks after. I mean, this is just the excitement level, I think, is at an all-time high that I haven't seen that for quite some time. So this is kudos to you and the teams there.
Oh, to everybody at DC, man. It was like a blast. I mean, it was really fun. And again, like to Ron B's credit, for example, like when we started pitching the story at that San Diego. So the San Diego before this San Diego, we had a big summit, and it was like in a green room, the DC green room there. And it was Rom and Josh and, all different people. And we started coming up with the story, and it was like, well, what is the best narrative that speaks to like what this whole initiative's about? And it was like, well, the heroes have to sort of go beyond the limitations of the way they've been thinking about themselves on all these different levels if they're going to overcome this challenge. And the challenge is essentially the end of all comics, right? The end of all that you always hear about, the end of all stories. So that felt perfectly personified by like a Galactus level Darkseid, who kind of suddenly evolves into something far scarier because he realizes it's always been his mission, not just to sort of control things, but to end them. And that he has this relationship to the new gods and the old gods that Rom is going to explore in all kinds of really cool ways in the New Gods book that defines him in that way as the Omega. And all of that felt right. It was like, okay, well, we'll do Darkseid is coming in a way that you never have seen before, where he's just sort of, mutated out of, like, he's still the same thing at core, but he's found a new purpose, and it'll come out of whatever event. We didn't know absolute power at that time, so it was like, whatever event we're going to do that summer, it'll spin out of that. And then and it was like the heroes have to band together this way. And so we just made the story together collectively to speak to what the initiative and this moment is about, and what the story we want to tell over the next couple of years. And then it just became like, who wants to be in and be part of it? And not the initiative, everybody's part of that, but like, who wants to do a book that could spin in and then Mark Waid and Dan are really involved in it. They're doing their own thing, but you'll see by even in issue 1 of Justice League Unlimited, there's hints of it that are pretty obvious. And then again, like New Gods is sort of about if Darkseid is gone, what is forming here to take his place? What new Darkseid is forming? And then meanwhile, you have the Legion, and that's coming, the Evil Legion, that's coming in later in the year. And then we know what I just met with them, and I'm meeting with them in New York about what the fall event for next year is going to be based on this. So it's all kind of culminating in a cool thing for fall of next year. So, and then there's more like after this doesn't end, but the idea was like, I don't know, man. It was being able to commit to things for a while and like actually come in and do an initiative that felt like it wasn't just like here's like a one shot and I'm out, but like let's try and let's try and let's try and be a team for a while. And I'm not looking to tell anyone what to do on their books. You can ask anyone at DC. Like I don't do that. But to try and create a big meta narrative that everyone agrees on, that they can all kind of be a part of. I said, who does anyone want to write the fall event? If somebody else wants to write it, great. If they don't, or they want me to do it, we'll talk about it, and that. But just giving a plan. So it's like we all know where we're headed, and we can all enjoy and like decide where we want to be in that constellation.
So
that's my method.
Well, you talked about like creator-owned books. I know we'll get to Absolute Batman in a second, but I guess my big question here is coming out of that. You talk about the collaboration, the team. Do you think that everybody seems to be doing a lot of their sort of creative own books at the moment? Do you think that also leads and bleeds into like the big companies, and that might be why things might be maybe less chaotic and more people are more on board to be more collaborative now?
Yeah, I think that people are just. I mean, I think there's two big factors, right? I mean, everyone. I've never had a bad collaborative experience at DC in my tent. I know I've seen some bad ones, and I've had my issues with people at times, like to be totally transparent. But in terms of the people that I've worked with, like, and I've kept close, like I always had a good time at DC overall. But I think there's a general spirit right now that's very different than it was a few years ago, where it just kind of feels like a lot of the bullshit is kind of over. Where I think comics, like, again, like, so forgive me if this is like too. I don't want to be boring and be like this is like the mechanics of it, but I kind of feel like sometimes like people think of it when you're outside of it or when you're not making them. Sometimes it can be hard to see some of the forces that are at work, financially and all of that stuff involved. So like for fans, sometimes it can seem like the company has decided to do things, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's sort of the cultural landscape. And so, for example, like when I started at DC, like I said, it was just comics, and then Warner Brothers, comes in, and it's a really awesome thing and exciting. And all of a sudden, there's comic book movies. They were just starting back then. You're talking 2009. So it's the beginning of this giant Marvel universe, and there's like the excitement around the DC universe being built. And so there's all of this kind of like new investment and money, and stores are suddenly doing Funko Pop. Like it's like geek culture everywhere starts blowing up. Cons are huge. Everything's big. And there's also fluidity. Like you become part of a company where I could work on the video game or the animation or that stuff. And people did that. People worked on the TV shows, and people worked in toys. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but there's the promise of that stuff. And I wasn't personally very interested in that. I was very much like stay in New York, do comics, but there was always that mobility. And so you become interested in all of that as part of the ecosystem of comics, right? Indie, 2013, 2014, all of a sudden, indie comics start being used for TV stuff, Walking Dead. And Image has this deal that's really beneficial for people. They give you your rights, you go out and sell stuff. And there's this sudden boom as streaming starts rising for content. And so a lot of people like me who were just doing the books that you liked, like I was doing Witches, right? All of a sudden, I could make a living doing witches. And so that was brand new.
Congrats. The show's
congrats.
looks like you
Oh,
talked about
thanks.
like possible season 2 be getting in the works soon and the animations.
We're
getting worked
just
on,
we're
so
just
congrats.
finishing we're finishing the writing of season 2 this week. So the season 1 is greenlit and it's going on TV. You will see it in 26, but the season 2 hopefully will get greenlit too. We have like the green light for the writing of it, and then if they like what they have with season 1 in production, they can decide on season 2. So here's hoping. But you will see season 1. So we won't know about season 2 for a little while. But we made it and I love it. Like we wrote it, and but so this was a new thing. All of a sudden, you could go do indie comics and make a living. That was, in a big living. Like all of a sudden, there was all this money in it, right? So you see all these people gravitating towards doing their own stuff and owning their own stuff, and great books like Rick Remender's stuff and Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky, and there's this boom of all these great books. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, over the last decade, there's been all of these strange and new and exciting opportunities that kind of come and then they can die down. Like right now, streaming, there's sort of a cratering of that in a lot of ways, or at least a reduction of that. And a lot of us also, like, you explore and you do the things that you feel creatively most excited about. Like for me, like my journey was like, or my, not journey, but like my career was sort of like, I was into superhero comics. I stayed a lot longer than I thought I would stay. Then I decided to go out and do creative stuff, and I lucked out and started doing creator owned right at a moment when streaming was booming, like right before the pandemic. And all of a sudden, streaming took off even more. So I lucked out with it. But it was never about trying to decide where you could, do those things. And I think that's always when you lose. It's like when you're chasing that stuff. But sorry, it's neither here nor there. The bigger point I'm trying to make is that at this moment, it feels like all of those things have we're all used to the kind of, guess what, that, you could do this and it's new in comics, or there's money in this, or there's something for this. And I think it's been like a very fascinating kind of roller coaster the last 10 years of all that stuff. And now it's kind of become really stable where, like, yeah, it's gone back to normal where, like, you can do an image book and get it options. Like, that's there. It's really nice, but it's more of a conventional thing. It's not like everybody fighting and vying to give you hundreds of thousands of
That makes
dollars for stuff.
Yeah.
And similarly, like with superheroes, there's this kind of like, it's not about doing superheroes anymore for what's going to be in the movies, because you see that's kind of done. So it's more like there's a return to core. There's a sensibility right now that I think you see with Transformers, with G.I. Joe, with Marvel, with DC, with Turtles at IDW. You're seeing all these licensed properties returned to by big or just, young and exciting writers and artists who want to just invest in them, not for another reason, but just to make something that they're excited about and feel like renews it for them and just shows everybody how awesome it is in comics. It's a very like, let's show everyone again that this medium can make these characters relevant and fun and epic and awesome in ways that no other medium can, because it's where they live and breathe. And so there's that feeling to me right now, all across the whole, like across the medium.
It feels exciting again. It almost feels like everybody is, for the first time in maybe a long time, it's like there's a true excitement behind comics. And it's always been there, especially with the hardcore fans, but I feel like even more so now that we've kind of moved into this other golden age, like it feels great. There's like a breath of fresh air. There's a lot of excitement between the fans and the creators almost.
Don't you guys feel that too? I mean, I just feel like it's like people are reinvesting in comics for comics, and it, again, like, the people I'm close with, like throughout all of this kind of thing, you're always doing the same thing, like the golden rule of the class I teach is always like, you've got to write the comic that you would like to pick up and find that day. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes it'll be something nobody else wants to find but you, but like, that's okay. And, I'm proud of the way that my friends and I have like tried to do those things, or picked books like that aren't necessarily always commercial, like Park Prose books or this or Dudley Dotson, and trying things that the whole last 4 years for me was just trying things I'd never tried, right? And Comixology and Image and Places were nice enough to just fund those comics. But at the end of that, it's kind of like, okay, well, now you really feel like I've been away a long time. What's the biggest challenge? Well, the biggest challenge is to come in and be part of this initiative, build something you're really proud of. Is like a big thing. And I didn't think I didn't know if I was gonna take any book, really. I didn't know what I was gonna take in the line. That was the last thing for me to decide. So it was sort of like really late that I decided I was gonna do Absolute Batman. But I don't know, it took some convincing. So yeah, but it was like, it was that. It was the idea of like, I don't know, it was the whole thing. It was like, because the way that I pitched to DC was like, they were like, where do you want to fit? And I was like, well, I'll do the main story with Josh. Like that I know I want to do. But then I don't know if I don't know what else I'll do. So they were like, okay, well, we'll hire you to consult. So they hired me to consult for the year to just help put the initiative together, build the story. And then I would be responsible for the populating of the first 3 Absolute books, meaning I was responsible to find people to do those books and to make sure that editorial was like happy with those books, and to also make sure there was an energy and a campaign around All In, and Josh too. So the 2 of us were like partners in all of this stuff. And so it was like, first I thought I would do Absolute Wonder Woman. I had a pitch for it I really liked. I was like, maybe I'll do that. It was different than the pitch that Kelly is doing, which I think is better, and hers is better, and I love what she's doing. But I was like, maybe that. And then when she came onto that and Jason took Superman, I really didn't think I would do Batman. So I was like, maybe I'll do Detective Chimp. That was like my next big pitch. Was I wanted to do like a Tom King style Detective Chimp book, and they were kind of like, they were like, if you want to do it, they were not super thrilled. And they were like, if you're not gonna do one of the Absolute books, then you have to find someone you think will really helm Batman. And I went to a few people, and great people, but they couldn't do it for work reasons, family reasons, stuff like that. And then it was, I don't know if I've told this story once or twice, so forgive me if you've heard it, but like, it was Tynan who called me and was like, James Tynan, who used to be my student when he was an undergrad, and I was like a 20-something adjunct, and now is like the guy I learned from because he's so brilliant. But he was like, you should do Batman. And I was like, I can't do Batman. I can't go back to that. It was like, I was super scared. And he was like, well, that's why you should do it. Because the way I had been pitching the Absolute Universe to people, like when I went to Jason, I was like, and Jason was the first person to sign on. He signed on back a year ago. So it was a year when we were in San Diego. So he was the very first person that I knew would do it. And I was so excited. So he architected a lot of the Absolute mythology with me. And I knew him pretty well, but not that well. Now we're quite close. So it was fun though. We got to know each other over the year. We talk to each other every week, a couple times on the phone. And as we got closer, anyway, the way I pitched him was to be like, to the Absolute Universe, like the ethos of it is, this is a world where the heroes are really underdogs, where they got to be tougher and more badass and just more exciting. And anything you think is holding back that sort of, that element from them in the main universe, you take away. There's nothing sacred, but you got to get down to the core of who they are. In this, they're still who they are, but like all the things like that make them, recognizable, you can take away, like the farm or Smallville or whatever, because Superman is this core thing. And I was like, so Batman, like for example, Batman to me, it's like Batman, like, he at core is just somebody who suffers this huge trauma and turns it into fuel to make sure he makes the world better. And that's all he is like everything else, the money, this is not. So I was like, so for example, with Batman, you could invert his whole mythology. You could have him coming up, rough and tumble, working class, and you could have him know all of his villains growing up because they all lived in Crime Alley in that area in Park Row, and you could change everything and make him the chaos and make the villains the system. And if you want to do that book, and nobody took the book, and then they were like, James was just like, you've been pitching that book, you've been like soft pitching it for the last year, so you got to do it. And I was like, no. But then he was like, try this. He was really funny. I was walking around my neighborhood talking to him. Like, I still remember him. Like, and he was like, who do you want to do it? And I was like, well, if I did it the way I think I would do it with like Nick Dragata, I don't know him though. I only know him a little bit. And he's like, just call him up and see. And if he says he'll do it, you should do it. I was like, all right. So I called Nick, like cold called him. I'd never really spoken to him except in email because I love his work, but I also really admire him in the community. He did this whole program, Creators for Creators, at Image that I'm a part of, where it funds like up and coming people's comics. And I was like telling him, and I was like, we're doing this absolute universe. And I pitched him what the Superman one was, the Wonder Woman. And I'm like, and the Batman is this. And he was like, stop. He was like, are you calling me to ask me to do the Batman one? And I was like, yes, I think I am. And he was like, I'm in, let's do it. And I was just like, oh, all right, I got to do it. And it's become like just the most thrilling thing. I just love it. I love the book. Like it's become my like happy place where it went from being this place of tremendous stress and like worry, like, can I do this again? Nick started coming over. He lives right across the Sound in Connecticut, and I'm on the shoreline here in Long Island. And he just comes over on the ferry. We go into my studio, and he just started putting pages up. And we got the design first. Where he was like, "How do you see him?" And I'm like, "He's big." And he like drew this big Batman. I was like, "Bigger." He drew bigger, bigger. I was like, "Bigger, bigger." And it was fun. He was like, "He's like the Hulk." I'm like, "Yeah, bigger." And because he was like, well, why would he? Because the core, it was just that. This was literally what he taped on my wall. And I was like, that big, that big. And he was like, can you just tell me why? And I'm like, because if he's gonna come up raw, like, and not be able to travel the world and not be able to train, he's got to be this like force of nature. You know what I mean? Someone who you see and you're just like, God damn, I don't want to go up against that dude. And he's got to train like MMA in the street. He's got to, be vicious. And he doesn't have a secret identity. He doesn't have to be suave. He doesn't have to pretend to be anyone because he's nobody. He's everybody. He's just a guy on the street. So it was just like all these things. And he was like, all right. And he drew it. And once he drew that, and that was like one of his first things, he's like the raps for boxing. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is going to be, and it's been so fun. I mean, I still get super scared at times. Like I'm still like, am I out of my like? Am I totally out of my lane? Is this stupid? But I love it. I mean, issue 2 is better than issue 1 in my opinion. Issue 3, I can't wait for people to see. I just finished issue 4, which of issue 4 is all about the bat getting bigger on his chest. The whole thing, like the whole issue, is designed around like the emblem, just why it's so big. But yeah, man, I don't know. I just love the book. I really do. Like,
So
I hope
what
people like it, but I love it. I love it.
we're loving it already. But what is it that obviously you've jumped in a little bit, but what can you tell us about this new Bat series? It's really just going to throw us for a loop.
Well, everything. I mean, it's really inverted. It's not. I know it's like oh well, Batman poor. Like you've seen that. Like you've seen him lose the money, but that's still a guy who grew up with money. You know what I mean? It's still a guy who comes from that place of he is still the system. He's still order. He still comes from a place of power in that. And he is sort of the restoration of that thing when he comes in. He's not the thing trying to break it. In this, he is the chaos. He's like the monkey wrench. He's the disruptor. He's sort of the fire that you're like, what is that thing? And so you'll see him team up, like, and you'll learn in issue 2 where they're like, there's like just everybody's recast. So like the Red Hood gang, you start hearing about what are they? Is he working with them? Alfred is sort of my point of view character. Because this is again, like, so kind of when I did Batman the first time, yeah, I was sort of fired out of a cannon onto that book, right? Where I was just like, I was so new. I mean, all I wanted to do was comics since I was a kid. And then I fell into writing prose because I didn't know how to get into comics. And I really love writing prose too. I love Stephen King and all this. And so I was kind of doing that when I suddenly got the opportunity to pitch for comics, which I was like, please, yes. I was writing stories, and a story caught the attention of like a couple editors. They came to the book reading, Mark Doyle and Janine Schaefer. They were on a date. I didn't realize it. I thought one was from Marvel and one was DC. And they were like, they're at odds with each other, but they were actually there on a date. And now they're married and have kids. But they, but like I lucked out getting in. And the minute I got in, they were like, I got American Vampire and I was so excited. And then I was 2 issues into that when Detective Comics was suddenly open and they were like, do you want this? And, it's like being offered your dream job when you're just learning like the orientation to the office. And you're like, do you want to be CEO? Or it's like, do you want to pitch in the World Series when you're just a single A baseball player? So I always just tried to write from what am I afraid of about myself or about the world in Batman. So those fears are very on the surface, right? So like death of the family is like fear of being a dad, where Joker is like, you don't really want kids, you don't really want a family. And we were pregnant with our second kid, who's real on in now. But the like, where it was like Joker's like, I know you just want to go back to being you and me. And all the stories were like that. They're all my fears. And that's all I could do because it was you never got a month off. And I never this from the second I was on Detective, it was every single month you're writing Batman for 6 years, And so it was just like, how do I keep this job that I love more than anything? How do I always put as much of my own like fears and hopes into it? Now being away from it, like I can approach it from a very different angle, right? So this is entirely different from that Batman run. And I'm not trying to compete with that. Like, I'm just trying to do something different that feels right to me now, which is now I can write Batman as a character who's not for kids at all. This book is like far more adult and violent and more
Definitely
violent. It's definitely more violent and for adult than like the stuff I wrote on Batman. But I would say I am writing it for my 17-year-old in the way that Batman is what I see in him and his generation of kids, and I'm like, what is the world that like we've given them? This world that like, feels like it's on the
Good point.
brink and everybody's fighting with each other. Politically, everything's divided. Everything feels like superstorms, and like it's all just like how could they be hopeful with like how have we screwed this up so bad? And yet, like they're not only hopeful, but they're resistant. They're like go out and you know march about things they believe in, and they have very strong opinions about what they won't accept and will accept, and it's really inspiring. And so it's like, well, what if Batman is that? What if Batman is 23 and just like is not going to compromise no matter what? And he's almost like an alien to Alfred, where Alfred's like, and that's so I'm kind of Alfred in it, where like I get to write Alfred POV. Alfred is this more like he's sort of a jaded MI6 operative who's been around the world and done some pretty bad things, and he's super badass. Like, but it's not like debonair spy. It's like he's black ops, like tough. And so he comes to Gotham hunting somebody that he's been chasing. Or he's been chasing this dude around the world. You learn later who it is, but he's been chasing this guy, and they suddenly stick him in Gotham where he does not want to be. And he winds up crashing into Bruce because he's assigned to track this gang that's like destroying. All of a sudden popped out of nowhere, and it's just like rioting all over Gotham, called the Party Animals, and they're just like tearing Gotham up. And so they're like, we need you to see what the source of this is to Alfred, and that puts him in conflict with Batman. And Batman is just like this kid who he's like, I can't believe he's just like he doesn't kill and this and that, but like,
He's
man, he's gonna get
precise and
crushed.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's gonna learn. He's he's such an idiot. Like, of course, they're gonna crush him, and yet Batman just will not stop. And see, that's the art. The emotion of it is fun because it's like out for me because it's Alfred being inspired by Batman, the way I'm inspired a lot by like I think the next generation of not only like creators but just young people out there, given the world that they're facing, that they're so passionate and hopeful, so many of them. And that's kind of what Bruce is here. He's just uncompromising. He's like, fuck you, Alfred. I'm like, no, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to compromise the way you want me to. And that's kind of the heart of the book.
You kind of mentioned like that surprise. There's a scene in this book. I'm not going to give it away, but there's one that really made me see what you're talking about right now. And it has to do with Alfred and Batman and how Batman shows that he's always watching. I'll leave it at that. And I was even like pleasantly surprised. And I really like how you wrote it from that point of view, because you're right. I'm around through work a lot of the younger generation, and they really are kind of inspiring to some of us who at this point we're probably jaded. We're tired. We're like the Alfred. So when you kind of go into talking about Batman and his physicality too, like being that force, is that like what went behind, like why did you want him to be bigger? Was it because of that, or like was it the dark side influence, with the all in special? Like what was the reasoning with Batman being bigger other than like, hey, he's just from the streets essentially?
I wanted him to be like a force of nature. Like the very first thought I had about him was that he was giant. And I was just like, it never occurred to me that he wasn't. And then Nick, when we started, he's like, let me, because we both loved Paul Pope, like be it Batman Year 100. And he was kind of like, let me try something where it's a little more like he's young and kind of spindly and more Miles Morales in terms of his, he's young, just in terms of his style. And I just couldn't see it. It was just like, I feel like I'm writing, I just feel like it's like try hard. I'm trying to make him like read young as opposed to just making him the thing that I'm inspired by in young people, which is just this indomitable spirit. So why not just like make him huge? Just make him like this. And so he drew him big, and I was like, it's just him. Like it just the essence of him is. And so we're doing this issue now. I'm really spoiling things, but like so issue 4, like I said, has this kind of explanation of how when he got so big, and you actually see it's an issue that shows him training and his first attempts at being Batman, and he's not big in the first one. He goes out and he tries to be scary, and it's fun. Like there's 3 different sort of Batman sequences, and you see him thinking bigger and getting bigger. But it's really tied to this kind of, without spoiling everything, it's tied to like this thing this story about him and his father when he's young, leading up to before the kind of the moment where a violence that changes Bruce's life. And it's like his father, and it's referenced in issue 1. So in issue 1, you learn that Bruce was this really smart kid, and he won like a state engineering competition at one point, like for kids, and he built this like bridge that looks like kind of like a bat wing. And so this is the story of him building that bridge and why he did that, and how his father kind of, he built one that was like, well, if it's a bridge the challenge is like to be inspired by an animal at the zoo and build an engineering project that essentially like would be for a place in need, to get in supplies. And so Bruce is working on this project, and it's all about the first one he does is like this tough bridge that can't be knocked down, and his father's kind of like, is that what a bat is? Like, is that? And it's all about bigger and bigger and bigger. And ultimately, like what a bat is, in my opinion, is like in this version, because it's something different in our, but it's like it's the only mammal that can fly, the only one, that genuinely fly. And so it's the thing like us that defies all the laws of physics, the things that holds us down. It's the thing that does the impossible, right? It literally just defies the laws of gravity and goes. And so it shows you what you're capable of. And so the whole issue is about bigger, and he lifts and he gets bigger and he builds the cape and he builds, and that whole fun of like, you see him sawing the thing bigger, the emblem, and it's supposed to be like it's bursting off his chest because he's just so full of like determination to just change things and just be out there, like just in the mix. I just love him. I love writing him, and I love writing Jim. They're all different, like Jim Gordon, like
Yeah.
his relationship with Bruce's parents when they're younger. All this stuff it's all brand new to me. It's like, when I did Batman. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, 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 no. You're good. I was just gonna say like the way you kind of crafted him is the way we see Batman. Like he's larger than life, and that's how he appears on the page. And that's something that really has stood out for me from the way you picture him. That no matter where we are in life, we will always see certain people and certain characters, like our parents, being like larger than life, and that's what Batman is to us. So seeing him on the page like that, it's really cool.
Yeah, and there's a really, every issue, it's very the interesting thing with the book, not to get too in like craft stuff, but like, when you realize you're going to be subtractive, right? So like, I know, like I'm taking away all this fun stuff. Like he doesn't have gadgets, he doesn't have like high tech gadgets. He doesn't have like amazing cars and, a super cool mansion and planes, right? Then what can I give him that makes you be like, oh, he's awesome. He's super fun. Like also he's still so badass without it. So that's where a lot of the stuff comes from, like the axe, well, not to spoil stuff, but like the axe that comes off the chest, and the bat, like the cape, the way that it moves, the way he can walk on it, the way it hooks people, the way he can climb. You haven't seen that yet, but he can climb buildings like with it, and it's awesome. Like he climbs like a bat. It's my favorite thing.
That is sick because I noticed you used the cape to like walk on it. I was like, oh, we're gonna get weird with this. This is awesome. So the fact that he's gonna climb with it, oh my god, that's amazing.
Every issue comes back to that panel that you just showed, the first page. So like on the first page, you see this, like that bats are crazy. So the plaque in the bat house in the zoo, it says bats can fly, they walk on their hands, they hang upside down. That's what that says. And in the issue, you see him walk on his hands and hang upside down. And there are other things, like there's another in issue 2, you see one that's like bats can be social or like loners, and the whole issue is about him and his friends and all this. And then but you see it because Gordon is going in there in the past, and it's not like just the panel is in your face, but it's like the whole arc is built around that idea of what is a bat, like what is it at core. So that idea of like, yeah, the cape, you see him constructing it and putting these beams in it, and it folds, and they're, again, I don't want to spoil everything, but he's got all kinds of cool shit in his suit. He's got flamethrowers.
So dope.
You haven't seen half like the stuff and he is like, I mean, I went back and forth with the violence, but I was like, I don't know, man, like as long as he doesn't kill, I don't really have a big problem with it, especially because he's up against different odds. Like he's not, the problem with Batman being hyper violent when Batman is somebody who is fighting street criminals and has like, even if he's like surrounded by them, there's a certain kind of still weird advantage he has by being like, just a super billionaire with like all kinds of amazing stuff. And there's something queasy sometimes about it. As much as like I love it and I can write it till I'm dead, like mainstream Batman, I love it. And I'll always love writing him as a billionaire and all that stuff. There's occasional things where like, him going up against people, when he goes up against people that are just street criminals that are desperate, which he doesn't often do, and I didn't have him do, and most people don't do, because you put him up against crazy super criminals because that's a good match, with someone who has all these resources. But there's a time when like he goes out and he's just fighting on the street, and it can start to get, it can not feel bad, but just there's something, in the relationship there that can feel strange at times, I don't know, like
He's like beating up on easy targets. You're almost like, oh man, I feel bad for these poor guys. They're the bad guys there. It's like,
well, yeah, but he's the most trained, most armed dude, right? In terms of that. So you've got to really throw down. Like, and so what he normally does is he really pulls his punches, and that's how you always write Batman. He's always like, he is compassionate in that way. But if you flip it, and he's the one with like nothing, and then the gang he goes up with against in this arc, and successively the people he goes up against have more and more resources than him in this, like, and you'll see a lot of his villains and a lot of that and how they're recast in different ways. But the idea is to have him always punching up. So even when he's going after this gang, what you start to learn by the second issue is the gang has this funding and all this stuff, and so they're, and so I didn't really feel bad. I don't know. I really went. It was actually the last decision in the first issue was like, there's a scene where he gets pretty violent, and I was like, oh, maybe we don't. I don't know. And then I showed it to some of my friends, and they were like, no, you should. He's who he is. Like, go for it. And I just feel like that's who he is. Like he doesn't kill, but he's gonna hurt you. You know what I mean? He's gonna hurt you pretty bad, and he hurts you in a way that's kind of like, I want you to go think about your life. Like while you're actually, Nick wrote that line at one point. I almost put it in where it's like right before he like really like, he really hurts this guy, really like compound fracture, huge dude, just in issue 2 where he's like, I want you to go, this is your chance to go reflect on your life choices. And he's like, breaks his arm, breaks his other arm, breaks his leg. And I was like, it might be a little, I don't know if we'll put it, but that's his philosophy at this point. And I don't know. I always was I hate when he uses lethal force. I've never agreed with that, and that's just my thing. I feel, it's a lot of people's thing, but I mean, like, I understand if people disagree with that, and I don't really argue that point. It's just my version of Batman in my head doesn't fit with that. but I do feel like this version organically the same way in my mind, he was bigger from the start. He's more violent from the start. He's more like because he's making a show of don't mess with me. You know what I mean? He's saying like because he cuts people where they'll bleed but not bleed out. You know, he breaks your arm in a way that's really theatrical, so the snap is the loudest you could possibly hear it, so that everybody's like, "Oh my god, I don't want to go up against that guy." You know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah.
he's like
Yeah.
always he's making a whole show of it all the time, which means he's pretty violent, you know. So
Well,
yeah.
But
you-
it works for the story though, because I mean, where in the past, like he's been trained and he's focused and he's literally made himself into the ultimate human being of a lethal weapon. In this case, he's still coming into his own, so he almost like doesn't know where the line is to cross, but he does. But he still wants to make sure that his impression is felt that, yeah, I'm going to do a lot of, you know, painful things, but I want people to know like this is what happens if you go against justice and vengeance.
Yeah.
And like you say, so it plays perfectly into it. And especially it's that different takes than what you've previously done that really makes it jump out. Like this is not the same Batman we've seen before. Like this is somebody
Yeah.
completely different.
No.
Absolutely.
And he's really zealotous about his mission. Like
Mhm.
he's like and I love that about him. Like Alfred has a lot of good points and reasons and Bruce will not listen to him. Bruce like will kick him before he'll listen, you know. Bruce does not care. And Alfred is just like, this will not end well for you. Bruce is like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care. Like, you know, stay out of my way. And that's it. And I love him. He's just a different beast. Like, and
Yeah.
that's it. Just I can't even see him in the same space as the Bruce I wrote before, which is what makes it so exciting. Like, you know, I have tons of favorite moments from the arc with the run with Greg. And again, I'm not trying to touch that run at all. Like it was the thrill of my life to get to do that. And Greg was just I text with him every single day, all the time. Like he's still like my best friend and all of that. And I'd love to work with him again too. But um, I have my favorite moments from that run, and they're not always everybody else's. Like, you know, I think some of them are, like some of them are the big fun bombastic things, but some of the best moments, like for me, were when you could find something that had never been done and you hadn't seen before and might have been quieter or whatever, but got into like, you know, an argument or a core thing about how you see the character, right? So like the end of Zero Year, where you know Alfred is like trying to get him to go out on a date, and finally realizes that Bruce is engaged or married to the city,
Mhm.
and he says that to this woman he knows Bruce would be happy with in some way, but he's admitting that Bruce is happier as Batman than he ever will be that way. And Bruce is happy as Batman, not tortured. And even that little thing is a different definition of Batman than I had seen, and I enjoyed that moment, even though it's not the loudest thing. Similarly, like there's a moment in the last arc we did where Bruce is like he's mind wiped and fighting the Joker, and he comes out and he sort of doesn't remember ever having been Batman. He doesn't have any of the skills of Batman, and he's just like a guy with a beard, and he's just like he's a teacher and he's happy in life, and he learns he was Batman, and he sits down on a bench at a lake, and this guy sits next to him, and it's the Joker, but it's the Joker who also went through the same thing he did and is mind wiped and human, so he's not white faced, and neither of them really know who they were, but in a way they kind of, I mean, they know who they were, but both of them don't know who the other one is, and they have this conversation about what they need to do with their lives, and it's just the one moment that like I it's one of my like few favorites of the whole run, just because it's not for me personally getting to a zone where you're doing something that speaks to what you think about these characters in a really core way, and yet like does it in a way you hadn't seen. That's just a thrill, and this whole series feels that way to me, where like there isn't anything that feels familiar. How he becomes Batman, what his relationship is to his villains, his parents, his cave, his car, everything. He does have a Batmobile that you'll see in issue 2. But like all of it is like
Mhm.
it's just all new. It's like, well, how would he do that? You know, would he use drones? Like what would he do? What's a cheap way to like all of it is like it's just all new. Like everything is just uncharted. Well, he's really good friends with Killer Croc. Like Waylon is the one that taught him to fight. And Harvey is the one that taught him about, you know, the way the city works. Because Harvey, you know, and Penguin, you know, Ozzy is the one that showed him the underworld. And it's all this like it's just all new, you know? It's
Mhm.
just to me. And I mean, again, I'm not saying I don't know if anyone will like it but me, but I love it. Like it's really it's
I'm
really
in.
fun to
Oh,
just
oh
have
yeah,
it.
I'm in.
It's just all
we are
new.
all in about this one. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh no, I'm just agreeing. I'm in.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we know that everything is kicking off in the Absolute universe with the Trinity, and you've already mentioned Detective Chimp. But having to dole out all the characters to everybody under this amazing tent of creators and artists and everything, is there a character you really had that missed opportunity, or someone that you really kind of just want to sneak in there in the Absolute idea?
I really wanted the other once Detective Chimp was sort of like, if you do that, you have to do another book. Like, was DC's thing because they were like, they wanted me to do something that would take him more center stage somewhere. And so the other character that I really thought about doing was Darkseid. I really had this whole idea. I still do, and it's working its way into this big story. But Darkseid as the villainous as villain for the entire history of the DCU in a way, like not reinventing him towards that, but what his narrative would be from the beginning of the DCU to now, and why what he's marching towards, and that kind of I love villain stories. Like I love Thanos Wins. I love like the Maker. I love like villains that are just larger than life.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's probably that I thought of doing a Spectre book. That was the other one. I mean, I still have this Wonder Woman idea I've always wanted to do, or not always, but the last few years, where it's really sort of like Hellboy meets Captain America kind of Wonder Woman. But
Ooh.
yeah, where it's so it, but I don't know when I'm again like to be clear, like Absolute Batman is a true ongoing. Like we're on it for 2 years, like signed in. So
Right.
there's no like it's a mini series. It is an ongoing unless nobody buys it. Like unless it like totally goes from like good sales so far to like zero. We'll keep it going. And with Nick, like we are the team. So he is exclusive now with DC to do it, and I'm there. Like again, like I said, I'm not doing it as a lark. I'm doing it to be like, can I build something on this book that feels like formidable? So, it's a monthly gig now. So, I mean, that's why I don't see myself doing any other DC books for a while, just because I still want to keep a foot in the creator owned. I love, I'm working with Distillery, and, I want to just,
Yeah, White
but I
Boat.
never White Boat. And we have this book that I'm doing with Jock coming
Jock.
out.
Mhm.
It's fun. It's really dark. It's you won't feel a thing. It's a serial killer book, but it's like
Mm.
yeah, it's fun. The way it's really fun. Actually, I was with the guys at Third Eye Comics in Maryland, Steve, who runs that. He's awesome, and he's like, I'm really good at pitching, because I was like telling him about how I was gonna tell Distillery the idea, and he's like, tell me what it is, and I was like telling him, and it's about a guy who's like he's a federal agent, but there's been this like one serial killer that's kind of eluded him his whole career, but nobody believes this guy really exists except the main character, and they all think it's just a series of random killings that aren't really connected. But the way he started his career was because he was engaged to a woman when he was a teenager who was killed by this who he thinks is this person, and it threw his life into this direction. And so now has early onset dementia, and he has a nurse, and he's in care, and he's kind of losing his memory, or his mind really, and he's in his early 60s, and he starts to believe that this killer actually grew up in the same he's in his hometown and grew up in the same town and has returned to this town and he wants to solve this case before he and so I told him to Steve, and Steve's like, okay, it's like Cocoon meets, and I was like, dude, don't like nothing meets Cocoon, because he's old and like it's as a rest home thing, and I was like, please don't, like it's not Cocoon. But anyway, yeah, it's fun. It's a serial killer thing that cuts back and forth between a
That
guy
sounds
towards the
dope.
end of his life, yeah, and the sort of things his younger life when he was after this guy, and the guy's really scary. He overkills everybody, is why nobody sees the connection, because he doesn't care what he uses, but he's so violent that you just don't even understand if it's the same person, and it's all over the country. So, but he believes that it's this guy. So anyway, the point is like I really want to keep a balance to my life this time and not be like only DC the way I was for so many years. To just be able to keep one foot in each and enjoy it. You know, the 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 last like 4 or 5 months has just been like, you know, it has been the worst of my career in terms of like the writer's strike, like the Hollywood writer's strike pushed the writers room for Witches like on top of the Batman stuff and DC All In, where it was supposed to happen like 6 months ago. And it turned out great. Like I love both things, but I've never had like the amount of work that I had from like May till now. And it was just like so I'm very excited to just now that it's finishing and we're really happy with everything, be able to just be like one book at DC, one indie, and just sort of like try and reconnect with my kids and stuff a little more and that, you know, because and it's my goal. Yeah, one DC book, one create your own book, and or you know maybe two, but create your own is easier than doing DC books. You know, it's just more. There's more calculus to DC books or Marvel books just because you have to figure out what it ties into. There's all that kind of stuff. Whereas when you're doing your own book, it's just like, you know. So yeah,
Run
so
free.
that's kind of my plan. I think I can stick to it. It's good. But it's fun, that book with Jock, because Jock is always the person that you go to when you go to the stories that are the most autobiographical, like which I go to Jock, even if they're kind of couched in all this like genre stuff. But like I said, this summer felt that way to me. And so the book, the You Won't Feel a Thing, is like a guy who missed out. His family, he's not close with his kids or any of this stuff. And he kind of feels like if he could solve this case, it will all make sense. Like his life would make sense. And you know, there's definitely a correlation between being like, you know, if I just can make this cartoon awesome, or if I can just do this Batman story I've always, you know, I want to do and make it awesome this one time, then maybe, you know, it will all make sense in some way. So the book means a lot to me. I'm really, really proud of it. And Jock is just, you know, you don't get a better friend and better partner too than him.
Yeah. No, his stuff is amazing. I can't wait to see that when it comes out.
Agreed.
Thanks, man. It's fun. It's super dark. Like it's definitely like pitch black book.
Oh, I can't wait.
I know, I can't wait. Is there anything else that we should be on the lookout for besides, you know, Batman? I know there's like White Boat, other books. Like, what else do we got happening the rest of this year?
Yeah, I'm doing another arc with. Well, we're going to announce more stuff at New York Comic-Con.
So mad I can't make it.
We'll be there.
It'll be fun.
We will. Sorry.
Oh,
Matt.
nice. Yeah, come see me. Come hang out.
I know it's my
don't think
birthday
DC has a
weekend and I
booth.
can't go. I'm so sad.
Oh man, yeah, DC. I don't think DC has a booth this year, but I'm there signing it, the Artist Alley stuff a lot, and you know I'll be around. So I'd love to see you guys in person, and anyone that's there that's listening, please come say hi. Nick and I'll be there a lot, and I'll be there with Greg Pulo too. We're gonna go out and hang out, and yeah, just it's a blast. I mean,
Absolutely.
I love New York.
New York's
My
like
hometown.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
My parents come. It's fun. I used to like, because I grew up in the city, so I used to, and they still live in like my high school apartment. So I used to go stay with them. And when I started out, and I would like go to Comic-Con and sign a few books and feel good about myself, and then like go stay at my mom's, you know, in my old room where it was like all my high school humiliations were on the walls still, and be like, I'm not this boy anymore. You know? So I'd be like, no, I'm
getting my own room.
Right? People wait in line for me now, you know, like that. So now I get a hotel, you know. So yeah, I'll be there.
Married. I'm living alone. Kevin McAllister said it best.
Right? Yeah, but I can answer anything too. I feel bad. I like, you know, you wind me up and ask me one question, and I just talk your ear off. So
We're good.
Sorry.
You'll have to just make sure everybody listening go to you know, the panels, the booth, everything to see what's happening, because New York City Comic-Con's been pretty good time.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's really good. Is this the top of the 21, or is the bottom where people is the newest of the chat?
I believe it's the bottom. I know.
So Jordy's is the newest one, and it goes down from there. So now
okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, if anyone wanted to ask it, I mean, like, I'm pretty open book about stuff, so I'm okay with any of it too.
All
You
right.
can tell
Well,
me you hate the idea or whatever. I don't mind.
all right. So let's see. First question up is from Andrew Campbell. Sorry if this has been asked, but what is the biggest challenge with writing a different take on a character with 85 years of lore?
Man, it's like I learned it when I first started on Batman, and it was Grant Morrison gave me great advice. Where I bumped into him in San Diego, and I didn't know him at all. Like we were at a DC, they were gathering us for like a DC panel, and we were at the buffet at the cafeteria of the hotel, and he was there, and I was like, oh my god, it's Grant Morrison. And he asked me what I was doing on Detective, and I was telling him, and he was like, "I'm going to give you some advice. Like, give your version of Batman a birth and a death, like just so that you understand his whole arc, just yours. I
Wow.
mean, imagine the whole thing and make it yours. Don't use any comics you've seen. What does it look like? From how does he begin and how does he die?" And it was great because it was just sort of this like you're writing fan fiction, you're owning the character, your version of it is your version of it. And what that does is it frees you from like the crushing weight of the legacy of 85 years of lore. And it was especially helpful to me when DC had like, because I signed on to do Batman when I thought it was Batman like 700 and whatever, and I didn't know it would be Batman #1 and the New 52, and all of that like hit me, and I had such anxiety. I like couldn't sleep. I was panic attack all the time, and that really helped me. It was Grant's comment to me about just make it like it's like owning it. And then once you do that, and the birth and the death, how he stops being Batman eventually,
Mhm.
or continues in whatever way he can. Then it feels like no one knows that character better than you, and all the lore is your lore, meaning like none of it pertains to you exactly. And it doesn't mean that you need to change anything from the past or whatever, but it establishes that this Bruce is your Bruce in relation to all that stuff. And so it really frees you from this like, I am going up against like better stories than I will ever write and a whole library of them. Because otherwise, you just get paralyzed, immediately paralyzed. Like, I remember when it was like they told me it was going to be Bruce Wayne, and because I thought it was going to be Dick Grayson when I started on Batman, I didn't know what I was going to write, but I was like,
Hmm.
oh, it'll be another. It was going to be Dick Grayson. I could move over from Detective. I'd work with Jock. It would be like kind of like just moving Detective onto Batman. It was like, no, it's going to be Bruce Wayne, and I was like, oh my god, what am I going to do with Bruce Wayne? And he's so tough. Like Dick Grayson, like tells you how he feels, and he's all like excited and scared to be Batman. And then that's how I felt writing Batman. And then like this guy, you know, he's so intimidating. And there was just this feeling of Alfred being like, "You gonna write something?"
Yeah.
And you're like, and it all just looms, and you're like, "There's the Batmobile! Oh my god, I can't believe it! There's the Batcave! Like I can't even. How am I supposed to do this?" And that really helped. So that's the best advice I got was like just you just make him into a creator own character essentially, and then it frees it. And that's what I did this time too. Again, it was like, who would he be if you just burned him down to the very core thing? Like he's just somebody who suffers this tremendous trauma, and you flip it and be like, and then he flips that to be someone who stops that from happening to other people at every turn and that cares about nothing else. And then if you burn everything else away, what does that mean now for you? Who would he be from birth to death if you were making something for your kids like right now? And then that's how you do it. So that would be my advice if you ever get to write any licensed character, to do that thing. Because once you start to be like, well, what's like the plot of Court of Owls is not that different than other like there's been plenty of secret societies and all that kind of stuff, but I think hopefully like what made it special was like my abject terror of the history of Batman at that moment, where I was like, how am I going to write Bruce Wayne? I'm just getting confident in this world, and now
Mhm.
all of a sudden the whole history is facing me. And that's the story of Court of Owls. Is like he's confident at the beginning, and all of a sudden the history comes to life, and it's like we've been around hundreds of years. And so it's injecting your own what you're making your own version of the character and putting them up against the things that you really stay up at night afraid of, so that you can be brave in the face of those things. And that always works. But if you think of a plot, maybe that works for some people, but I would always caution you against that. Like, just because, unless you can unpack it and be like, I thought of this plot because it means something to me about this, you know? Because otherwise, like, it's just almost every plot has been done. It's more how you energize it with the stuff that you care about. You know?
Mhm.
It's
All
a
right.
I think.
you take
I think.
Yeah. All right. Let's
Or
see.
you
We
just
got
make him really big, and that's it. You just make him huge, and then you go for it.
another question here from Henry. Scott, what villains are you using, and will they also have major design changes as well?
that you can
Yeah.
say.
That you can say.
I can't think of a villain, like a main villain, that is not in the book, to be honest. Like, so from issue 1, you'll see a bunch, like they're reinterpreted in issue 1, issue 2. There's like a whole like group of them, and then
Okay, can I question it this way? Are we
Sure.
getting like the A team villains, the B's, the C's, the D's, or the F's?
All of them. Like, you get, like I said, like you'll see the A-list villains. Like, I'm not saying they're villains yet, but you see them really
Okay.
quickly. They're in the book from the very beginning. And then there are villains who are already villains, who are A-list villains, who are coming to Gotham in the first arc and in the second arc. So by the second arc, it's really full of villains that who have come here because of what Batman is doing in arc 1. And then you see the big heavy start moving towards Gotham in the third arc, in the end of the first year. So there's like everybody is in it, you know. I mean, the only people they don't have any Robins yet. I'll spoil that. Like, you will see Dick Grayson, like you'll see them, but he's still starting out, so he doesn't have a Robin yet, and we have a plan for how he finds and has his first Robin, but that will take about a year for that to begin to develop. Because you want him alone for a while. He's alone, you know what I mean? He's a big dude and he's single. And he's like on his own. He's on his own.
Let's see. TJ, son of Millionaire. When working on initiative as a scale, what's the behind the scenes process? Like with editorial absolute teams, mainline D seems to tell the most coherent story.
That's a great question. I mean, it was getting together in person, honestly. It was really important to me. And again, I don't know how, please forgive me if this is like the most boring material ever, but
Absolutely
No,
not.
not to us.
Not
No,
to
we
us.
love this stuff.
like, so like, when I was with DC was in New York, it was an office, if you ever got to go there, it had all of this like really cool history and comic book material around it. You got out of the elevator and there was that amazing mural that people have posted on Facebook, done by all these seminal artists from, Neil Adams, Andy Kubert, like all, or just, of all the heroes. And you'd go down the halls and there was like comic pages and there were statues of the heroes, and every office had like, figurines. And then when they moved to LA, they had a really beautiful office because they were being like wooed, like Warner Brothers was like, we'll move you all out and give you this like gorgeous office. And it was glass comic book pages hanging from the ceiling, and every door had a comic book page painted on it. The glass is beautiful. And it looked out at the Hollywood Hills. You could see the Hollywood sign. It was on, right next to the Warner Brothers lot. And that was really cool. But like, the office got smaller because some people didn't move. And then during the pandemic, after that, they work in an office now on the lot, like on the Warner Brothers lot. And it's a beautiful building, but it's part of a constellation of Warner Brothers buildings, right? So it's not necessarily the DC Comics building the way it was, or the DC Comics floors. There's more of a philosophy because half the people, work at home one day, half the people work at home the other day, to like come in and you can work anywhere you want. And so there's not offices. It's more of like like that kind of WeWork mentality. And there's a lot of good things about that, right? But there is a problem with that too, in my opinion, which is that you're not concentrated the way you were in New York, where you're an office, right? Because sometimes you can start to lose the sense of, in my opinion, of connection and identity when you're scattered. And it doesn't mean you don't make great stuff, because I think they've made some of the best books the last couple of years they've made, like Dawn of DC, all the stuff you guys mentioned. Like, I think it's been great. But to do a collective, like an initiative like this, it feels like you've got to get in the same room and be like, we're all in this together. We're fucking DC Comics. You remember that mural? I
Mhm.
remember when I saw you out. I remember when we did this in New York. You're new, but I can see you love comics, and this. You got a spinner rack in your office, and just that we're all part of it. And so it was very important. Josh and I flew out, and like we were there together, and we got everybody in the same room and zoomed with everybody that wasn't there, and you got sales and marketing in the same office as editorial, in the same office as creative. And it sounds like very like sort of dry, but it really matters, because you get this energy all of a sudden where you're like, we are DC Comics. It doesn't matter if we're in New York or we're in LA, and we have the best fucking stories in the world and the best characters, and like that's who we are. And nobody does this for money, man. Like, nobody is out in that office for money. Like, you don't make a lot of money in comics. I mean, if you luck out and you get big gigs, sure, you can make
Mhm.
money, but nobody gets into it for that. When I got married to my wife, I mean, I gave this whole speech about how like I would never earn any money, but like I would watch the kids and I would love what I did. Like I was like, I love what I do, but like I'll never be the bread earner. But or you'll always make more than me and whatever, but I love this job and I'll do my best. But everybody loves comics. That's the common denominator. Nobody gets into it. Not one person signs up to edit comics that doesn't love comics, because it is a really hard job. And when you think about the size of the office, when it was in New York, I don't even know how many editors there were. There were so many. It was like 40 something, however many. There are something in DC, like currently in the teens in editors. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole editorial staff. And they're expanding, and they're going to hire, and they have, and it's integrated differently with different, so there's like, different workloads. But that sometimes when you go there and you see, it's like, it is not that, it is not that same thing that was in New York. And it's not like I don't like it out there. I just mean it was just its own thing in New York. It was just like you could do anything. It was wild, meaning like you didn't have any oversight. You could just do a story. And I came in on the tail end of that with New 52 as like the last, like, what is this? And then all of a sudden, you're there and you're part of this whole Warner Brothers system. And sometimes that means you might work in webtoons, you might work over here, and that's great. But it can kind of cause also you have a lot of different hats, and sometimes it's good to just put on the hat and be like, this is your comic hat, and we're all here for comics, and that's it. And so that's how we did it, was really to be like, try and it sounds hokey, but I'm being honest, like, to try and make it pure, just pure about comics,
Mhm.
not about like what's it tied to, not about how do we sell digital or how do we do this. Just, it's about comics, and it's about getting people back into stores every single week, and it's about reminding people that we tell the best stories, and we have every kind of story. And that, what do you want to do? What do you want to do, editor? Like, who I just met? What do you want to do, editor I've known 15 years? Like, what's your dream book if you have 2 years to plan what that is?
Mhm.
And sometimes that's a huge book. Sometimes it's a really small book. Sometimes it's a really out there book, and sometimes it's a really classic book. And so that's how we did it. And then with creative, it was trying to be really transparent. I'm sure we could have done a better job at times. Like, everybody wanted to do a lot of things when we mentioned it. Like, everyone wanted to pitch an absolute book, and we only have room for a handful, unless it super takes off, and then we can do more. But we're announcing more in New York. Like, we announced the names. We're going to say what Dennis Camp is doing. He was announced out in San Diego, but people didn't quite notice because it was just the names on the list.
Mhm.
Uche Grayson and Pornsak Pinochet, so really good stuff. But um, you know, we tried to just tell everybody what we were doing, and just be like, you can always reach out, you can be a part. There's plenty of time. Nobody's being asked to leave a book, or I mean, I'm sure if you didn't want to be on a book or editorial, and you weren't getting along or whatever, they
Right,
might
right,
do
right.
whatever they did. But point being, like, you all had time to make those decisions over the course of 2 years and not worry about it.
Yeah,
He's making his own Justice League. Think about it.
this is very, very true.
It's a creative
Yeah.
Justice League.
That's really what it felt like. I mean, it felt like you were like Superman coming in and making your Justice League with this all in, absolute series. It truly is. I mean, I'm kind of surprised. Like, take off the Batman hat, just wear the Superman hat around, because that's really what it feels like right now.
Like, get your own.
Well, thanks. Well, who's to say Batman wouldn't lead the Justice League?
That's also true.
Just
He
kidding.
does.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
It would be
He's a part-timer.
Superman.
yeah.
But the other key was to just make sure that everybody felt included and supported, even if they weren't doing a new book, or if they pitched something that didn't go through, or that kind of thing. That, like, what I told them when I went out there, I told editorial and told them to communicate it to the creatives. But like, I'm going to give you notes. Like, when I heard all the pitches for like all the books, like, and so did Josh, across not just the absolute books, but the main books. And some of the books you had notes on and said, like, you might want to try this, or I think this might work better that way, or whatever. But what I always said was, like, it's your book, with you and your editor, you and your creators. If you don't agree with what we're pitching, please do not do it. Do it your way. And I won't be any less supportive when I go out and promote the book, because I know you think it's your best swing. And that's all that matters, is if you think it's the best swing you can do, and it's the biggest swing, I trust your judgment better than mine. It's okay. And most people we did work with, and they were great. And other people, they convinced us they wanted to do the way they did. That was great. But it was that feeling of always trying to make it like, make nobody feel bullied, or feel like you have to change what you're doing, or I don't like that, or, because there were times at DC over the years where that stuff happened now and then. And it was always like, and I don't know. It was a chaotic culture for a while. I'm not blaming anybody or throwing anyone under a bus, but a lot of those changes of moving to LA and having all these new pressures and new things can cause a lot of, I think, chaos.
Mhm.
And so part of the goal of the initiative was to really try our best to avoid that and make it really smooth, and make sure everybody felt good about it. And so that was the goal.
No,
And
I think
I think we're close. Like, I'm sure I screwed it up somewhere, but I feel really good about it, and it does. I feel very proud of the work that everyone has done, and very proud to be like a part of it more than anything. It makes me happy going to bed being like, we built this thing together as a team. Because I'll tell you this, like, again, I know I'm sorry to keep going on and on, but
no, you're fine. We're good.
A lot of the things, a lot of it was taking a leap. And for example, like, there's a real belief right now that buying habits during COVID calcified around once a month buyers. And so if you notice, like, companies have become more they start to put more of their biggest books out the same day on 1 month, or they'll do every 2 weeks, but they don't do every single week their biggest stuff, or they load 1 day a month or something. And you start to see it,
Makes sense.
And so when we pitched All In, it was a very hard, you have to put all the absolute books out on 1 day, like all of them. And those would be the offerings from DC. And that wasn't because somebody was being a jerk or being like, oh, this is the way it has to be because I'm an overlord. It was because they really thought that's the best way to sell it. And it was a really good way to sell it. But what we did was me and Josh, we talked to a lot. We said, can we have a conversation with retailers with you? With Steve from Third Eye, and Gall from Midtown, and DCBS, a bunch of people, and be like, do you agree this is the best way to do this? And what we suspected and what they said was, no, we would prefer if you had good, like, every week, to try and undo the monthly habit. Because it's my belief, and I think their belief, and DC's belief now too, that everybody wants to be in a comic store every week that's a comic fan, or they don't want to go once a month. They just need to give them an excuse to go every week, and we'll all go every week. Because it's like, you could always get your comics by subscription. I had a subscription as a kid. I'd get them in a manila envelope, but I still went to Forbidden Planet on 11th Street and Broadway with my dad, because it's the culture. You want to go and you want to talk to people, and you want to browse, and you want to see it, and you want to ask people stuff and meet people. And so that's the point. And so even that decision was a lot. It was like a lot of DC is risking a lot. That's a lot of money for them to put up when they know they could own one day market share and be like, we sold 300,000 copies that day or 400,000 copies of all these number ones, to decide we're going to spread out Absolute Wonder Woman from Absolute Batman, hope it does well. By the way, I don't know if they've released the numbers or whatever it is, but Absolute Wonder Woman, like all the books have overperformed, which is really nice. But it's really nice to see books like Absolute Wonder Woman double, triple the expectation, well into the 100,000 plus lines, which is like not what they expected and not necessarily what we expected. And so it's
Right.
like,
That's
and what it
incredible.
proves, it's not on me or anyone else. It's more the comic fans want exciting stuff every week, and they want to go to the store, and they want to be included, and they want it to be fun, and they don't want to just go once a month. And so like that was like that's one small thing, but like that was a big not argument with DC, but a big leap of faith for them, and they did it, and I'm really proud of them for doing it. The Justice League cards, it's a small thing, but it cost them a lot of money to make those and give them out. And so, and like for example, first idea, checklist. You have to buy these 5 books this week to get them. Again, we like talked to the retailers. We knew what they were going to say, but fans, it was like nobody wants a checklist. Like, but they're like, how do we know? We just give the cards to retailers. They could just give them to anyone, people that buy Marvel. And it was like, totally, they could, But like that's part of the fun, is give it to them and let them decide what's going to get the best traffic in their store. If they decide they want to give them to every person, that might not be what I would do, because you want to try and incentivize something.
Right.
But like, if that's how they're going to get the best relationship with their neighborhood, great. Let them throw them up in the air and give them to everybody walking in the store. Let them decide, And again, DC took the leap of faith and made the cards, gave them, and that's what I mean is like, that's the stuff I'm really proud of, is that everybody at the company bought in, and they really tried it, and even the name All In, there was a lot of like, it doesn't sound like, like people like dark right now, and they said, like, so there was a lot of names that got thrown around. It was like, they were like, well, let's try and make it like it's like 2 worlds, so it's like best of both worlds. And I was like, no, that sounds like a Hallmark movie. And there's another
Hey,
that was
whoa,
like,
whoa, whoa, whoa! Hallmark movies. Hey, calm down. We love
I like
Hallmark
Hallmark
movies.
movies, fine.
It's about my season, all right? I'm about to put on the fuzzy
Oh,
slippers and
no.
go to town.
There was like, evolution, revolution, devil. It was like all these ones, and they weren't bad. It was like, man, we're all in. And they were like, that sounds like gambling and like wrestling. And I was like, it's right. It's awesome. Like we're all in, like chips on the table, we're all in.
You
So
kind of need that cheesy motto, though. It's not cheesy, but like
yeah,
sometimes it's so simple and kind of cheesy. But that's what gets like, yeah. I mean, you can attribute everything back to sports to get a championship team. It could be something simple as everybody is all in, and there you go.
yeah.
Like DC, it seems like everybody on this is all in, and it's the perfect title for this because it really shows the dedication, and so far it seems to be really paying off.
Oh,
Thanks,
yeah.
man. Yeah, I'll answer these right here, because they said, do we have planned crossovers? We do. We have a whole plan about how the of course, Ultimate Absolute Universe like fits in with the main universe, but we really want the stories to be able to work independently for a long time. So you'll see that happen. But crossovers between the 3 books we're already talking about, for that we want to go a year and then show how these characters meet. So we're already planning that. Was it disheartening over the weird backlash? It wasn't. No, it was actually, I can show you the text. Like, so when they released the logo for the Batman, we got all this like, that's so dumb and we hate it and whatever. And DC actually called and was like, do you want to do a story like explaining why? Because we want to correct the narrative. And I was like, why would you want to correct the narrative? It's awesome. Like, I love that people are mad about it, because we love it, and like we believe in it and know why it is what it is. And the fact that they're engaged is the most important thing right now, because we're proud of the book. We're not doing a book to upset them. We're making a bat to upset them. But the fact that they're thinking and talking about it is great. So no, it didn't upset me. It worried me that Nick would be upset. It worried me at first, but the fact that he was laughing the moment I told him about it was awesome.
Yes.
So, and then we just leaned in and we're like, you know, everybody just draw fan art, everybody make him bigger bat. Let's go for it. So no, and why did DC name Absolute? I wanted to call it because the way it came, we went back and forth a lot with different names for the new universe, and there was Alpha and Omega, and there was all this kind of stuff, and it just felt like it needed to feel like just fun and kind of badass. And so they were like, "What do you want to call the Batman?" And I was like, "It just feels like he's like Batman, like as he's Batman as fuck, like he's just Batman, like." And they're like, "Well, you can't call him that, you know, whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. But like, what if we did this and called it DC Absolute Frontier?" And they were like, "Oh, that sounds nice, whatever." And they weren't really thinking about it. It would have been AF. It would have been like DC AF. And we got all the way to the end, and then they kind of were like, "Actually, we're looking at this, and legal is going to have an issue with it." And I was like, "It's just, well, what about if it's like DC Advance Forward AF? You know?"
Obviously.
No.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
they put a stop to it. I still think there's definitely a contingent of people at DC now that regret it, that were like, "Oh, we should have had fun with it," because the more they see that you're having fun, and that's part of it, man. It's just like when you're so corporate and buttoned up, like that's part of the problem with comics, in my opinion, superhero comics the last number of years, is that there's been more corporate oversight. There's just less they're less inclined to take risks sometimes, you know, in bigger ways. And that's, again, nobody's fault, not blaming anyone. It's just a fact of the thing. And also, like, they're less inclined sometimes to like have somebody out front and be the face, and like the way Joe Quesada used to be and Dan DiDio used to be. And for better or worse, like there was a lot of things about Dan's whole thing, you know, that could be problematic, and Joe as well. But all I'm saying is there was still a kind of like, you know, hype. There was a front. You knew who they were. You knew the New York bullpen was. You knew this. And again, that culture needs to change in terms of being more diverse and more all of it. Like, but I just mean there was there was just sort of an identity to it, you know, or some identity. And I think being able, because there's sort of, they want the brands and the characters, and probably rightly so, to like shine brighter than the people involved sometimes. You know, when it comes to movies and this stuff and all this and that, there's just more of a culture now of stepping away back from it, and that. And in a lot of ways that's good. I'm not saying creators and everybody should be out there in front, but I do think that what I'm getting at is allowing the line and the characters to be creator forward. And that's what you're seeing on Transformers with Daniel Warren Johnson.
Mhm.
That's what you're seeing on G.I. Joe with Josh, and what you're seeing on Turtles with Jason and everybody he's working with over there. It's what you're seeing with Terminator, and with like, it's people coming back and being like, if you let me just do this thing. And that's what DC did. And like, ultimately what really happened was Marie, who's an amazing boss and like one of my closest friends, she edited Metal, and they made her the boss. And Jim has always been one of the people that likes taking a risk now and then, and just being like, go for it, let's do a crazy idea,
Mm.
let's throw a party. And we just lucked out, and they were like, you know what do we have to lose right now, let's do it. And it was like, great. But still, it was funny, Jim, sometimes I have to convince him again, like all over again, you know, get a call and be like, are you sure about this? And I'm like, I'm sure about this one, I'm sure about this part of it, like, trust me on this, like, let's try that. And then, you know, he's the first one to text and be really nice about everything too, so he's great. But
No,
yeah.
that's awesome. And especially too, it's the way, you know, to buy in all in, and especially seeing this big push that we're seeing with, you know, characters first. And this is something that you're seeing with DC All In, and now spiraling into Absolute Batman tomorrow at the shop. This is going to be an issue that everybody needs to go out, buy multiple copies, because it's that damn good. And I'm
Oh,
not
thanks, man.
spoiling anything for it, but the only spoiler you're going to get is going to be the lead review of over 30 reviews dropping at nerdinitiative.com, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on New
my
Comic
God.
Book Day.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, I'm telling you, like, I mean it sincerely. Like, when they told me, like, I know it, like, they publicize the sales, but it's not about the book. It's about the thing that's exciting to me is that all the books got a bump that week. All the books went up. Batman went up. Like,
Mm.
you know, every week so far at DC, sales have gone up. We sold out the All In initiative, which they printed a lot of, you know, and none of that is about me or even I mean, it's about the other creators, but it's more, it's the feeling of excitement that's really cool right now, where it's like people want to they want to be a part of something that is just about like comics are awesome. Let's just have fun and celebrate them and enjoy whatever book you like. You might like a book that's space opera escapist, whatever. Great, go buy that book. You might like a book that's hyper political, and great, go buy that book. But we have all of it, you know. You have all of it at once, and just be like, pick your poison and
Dude,
have fun, you know.
comics are fun again. You're right. My son is 9 and his friends, they come over, I have a comic book room full of comics. They sit in there and they just read comics. That's not something friends of mine ever did growing up. So to see even that age group, it just shows you that comics are so back. Everybody always loves to say
Feels that
that
way.
blank is so back, but we're having fun again, man. And it's because people like you, people like Josh, Kelly, everybody in DC, everybody across comics, period, are having fun, and it's bleeding into the pages so hard. And so just
Eh,
thank you for doing that.
no, thanks for saying that. And again, huge shout out to like all my buddies at Marvel, John Hickman, and like, you know, everything there's so many great things they're doing over there too. And again, like Image, you see going big with like, it just feels like everybody is sort of like, we're tired of being sort of quiet, or we're tired of sort of, you know, being quiet and being like, you know, sort of playing it safe or being connected to other things. Let's just remind everyone as a single thing why comics is awesome right now. Just that feels like the spirit that you're seeing filter into both the indie world and to the licensed world, where it's like you see these big and the sales are going up. Like I was talking to Tynan, and that's why, I mean, like with this, like it's an initiative and you hope it goes up, but it went way beyond what we had thought. And I mean, Absolute Batman is the best selling, for me, it's probably the best selling book I've done, you know what I mean? Which I never expected. I thought it would be like a quarter of that. But the same with, you know, Absolute Wonder Woman, but the same with the All In Special, the same with seeing books like Poison Ivy and other ones get a bump like that. It just feels like people want to buy in and like want to be, I don't know, you just want to be, you know, part of comics, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing right now. I mean, the movement is carrying over to the creators and the characters, and it's something that you're seeing, whether it's like Ghost Machine or the
Yeah,
Massiverse or
Ghost Machine. Yeah.
yeah, you know, you're just seeing so much of a focus of just making it fun for the characters again, and for readers picking them up each and every week. You know, we're all running into the shops now, and you're seeing just more people, and word of mouth too is going around too. That it's just like, hey, have you checked this out? Have you read this? And just that buzz is going, and it's just such a fun time to be a comic fan and a reader, and you're seeing that just grow organically. I mean, that's just something that you're seeing, especially going in this past week to my comic shop and literally getting stopped as I'm walking in, like, have you read this? And somebody's holding up the
Yeah.
All-In issue and just
Oh,
getting that buzz. And I'm like, oh yeah, I think I know about something or two about that. So, and just having those conversations and seeing more people like, what are you talking about? Let me go get that.
and people are committed to their series. Like look at James Tynan. Because, you know, I had a chance. It's funny because I was talking to Remender, and Remender was like, "You're doing all these shorter books. You know, why don't you do an ongoing?" And I was like, "Well, I have an ongoing with Noctera over here that I was doing at that time, but those are the ideas I have. Right? I never got to do. I didn't get to do. I come from like, you know, a novel. You can see the arcs that I did on that. It's like very beginning, middle, and end, done.
Mhm.
Beginning, middle, end. I love those stories. And so I was like, I just want to do those. Like, that's just what I want to, that's just where all my ideas are. I don't want to be, I'm so sick of doing one ongoing story that I had to do, you know, forever that. But what you're seeing now, I think, is like a lot of people, or what you're seeing now too, is a commitment to long form storytelling again, coming
Mhm.
back, like what James Tynan is doing between Something is Killing the Children and Department of Truth and now World Tree. And you're seeing even miniseries like Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, you're seeing
Yes.
that spin into more, Feral spin into more. I mean, Stray Cats spin into more. You're seeing Ghost Machine commit to the books for years, ongoing books, Geiger, and you know, amazing books coming out from them too soon. Hornsby, Halo and Hornsby, and
Mhm.
The Rockefellers by my buddies Pete Tomasi and Francis Manipal, who's amazing. Just tons of good stuff. And similarly, like you were saying, like Massiverse, Kyle is a good friend. See what he created over there, like that
Yeah.
emergent universe. It's just like, and that's what I mean is there's a commitment again to be like with me with Batman, or it's you want to just go in and you commit to it, do long stories again too. And I think that's part of it. Is it's like nobody's moonlighting, like everybody's in comics to be in comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the best thing about it. And I think fans are going to be saying the same thing about Absolute Batman when it drops in stores tomorrow. And we can't stress it enough. Wherever you're watching this or listening to it in podcast form, make sure you go out and buy this issue, buy some more DC, get back in. Because if you stayed away from DC for whatever reason, the all-in movement is where you jump back in and you're going to fall in love with so many characters and so many stories going on. This week, I mean, I don't even want to spoil anything. I have like about 5 books already lined up what I'm going to be talking about. And it's just that buzz of reading it. And it's reminding me like why I got into these characters. And like I say, seeing the fresh takes from the creators and especially seeing something like Absolute Batman is going to be a big monster hit at the shops. So you definitely want to go pick that up. Scott, we can't thank you enough for taking the time out to talk with us tonight. Definitely have to do it again.
Oh, anytime, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. And on behalf of our team here at nerdinitiative.com, like we said, new Comic Book Day starts 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with Absolute Batman kicking off. Over 30 reviews dropping every 15 minutes on the site and on the social. So if you need recommendations for what to pick up, nobody does it better than the Nerd Initiative Bullpen. And we will turn a page like we always do when you're at the comic shops and you have a great issue in your hands, such as Absolute Batman #1, and you see somebody struggling to find something. Hand yours off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next week. I'm out.